Isn't the Supreme Court's attitude lax, possibly even irresponsible?
Yes, repeatedly on this case, Supreme Court has said that, they will list it in due course. There are other cases also. Everything is important. Now, this I think is highly irresponsible. Supreme Court should be able to distinguish what is nationally important and what is a small local case involving two individuals. So, treating every case equally is not a good sign.
You have an election commission where every single member of the commission, both the election commissioners and the chief election commissioner, have been appointed by a lopsided government-dominated body.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
the point we're making is this is not a good situation for India's democracy. It is an unhappy situation.
Unhappy situation and extremely bad optics. It's an insult to the LOP. The two powerful members of the government on one side and LOP on the other side. It's a joke and on the nation and an insult. So, what kind of collegium is this?
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. In an article he wrote for the Indian Express yesterday, one of India's former chief election commissioners has drawn attention to something that has possibly been overlooked by many people. The Supreme Court's repeated and deliberate delays in handling the case about how chief election commissioners and election commissioners are appointed. It raises the question, has the court's attitude been lax, possibly even irresponsible? Joining me now is the author of the article, former Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Quraishi. Mr. Quraishi, in an article you wrote for the Indian Express yesterday, you have drawn attention to the Supreme Court's repeated deliberate delays in handling the case about how chief election commissioners and election commissioners are appointed. Given that this is critical to the fairness of our election process, and that in turn is critical to our democracy, isn't the Supreme Court's attitude lax, possibly even irresponsible?
Yes, repeatedly on this case, Supreme Court has said that, they will list it in due course. There are other cases also. Everything is important. Now, this I think is highly irresponsible. Supreme Court should be able to distinguish what is nationally important and what is a small local case involving two individuals. So, treating every case equally is not a good sign. Now, this case has lingered on for 8 years. You will remember that it was first filed in 2015. By the way, erroneously I wrote that it was filed by ADR in 2015. ADR joined later. It was filed by Arun Baranwal, Anup Baranwal, who is a lawyer. And later on, when nothing was happening, that is when ADR decided to join and got it expedited and things started moving.
Let's for a moment look at the details so we can get some sense of just how lax, or to use your phrase, just how highly irresponsible the Supreme Court has been. As you say, the case was first filed by Anup Baranwal in 2015. For 3 years, the court did absolutely nothing. Then in 2018, it referred the matter to a constitution bench, but the bench was never constituted. Nothing further happened till 2023, which means that for 8 years, absolutely nothing happened. That is why you believe the court has been highly irresponsible.
Yes, but just one correction there. That in 2018, the Constitution Bench was constituted. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
It was constituted, but it never met.
yeah, it never met for 4 years. Although it was constituted, the members were also appointed, but it did not meet for 4 years till November of 2024. When they met, and of course, then they decided very expeditiously whatever the decision.
In which case, let me add, if the bench was constituted but never met, it's not constituting it. What's the point of a bench that never meets?
Yes, exactly. 4 years. So again, there's the same point that the CEC the Supreme Court makes no distinction between ordinary cases and a case which will determine India's fate as a democracy. And when India democracy is destroyed, Supreme Court will be the next to be destroyed.
So
So
you're saying that that is what the Supreme Court overlooked. It overlooked the fact that this is not an ordinary case. This is a case that impinges upon the sanctity of our democracy, and therefore it's critical to India.
absolutely, nothing could be more critical for India than India's democracy, which is the basic structure of the constitution, and there is credibility is in question. And if you see public opinion, the way the faith of India in the election commission has been going down lately, so we need to address these issues very urgently.
Unfortunately, the irresponsibility, to once again use your phrase of the Supreme Court, didn't end in March 2023. In March 2023, the Anup Baranwal case was finally heard and judgment was given, and the Supreme Court appointed a committee comprising the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha, as well as the Chief Justice of India as a collegium to appoint commissioners and election commissioners. But, and the but is the important part, 9 months later, when this was overturned by the government in a manner that blatantly breached the spirit of what the Supreme Court had done, and it was then challenged by ADR, the Supreme Court did absolutely nothing. Once
Yes.
again, its own order, breached blatantly by the government in terms of the spirit of the order, that is challenged by the Association for Democratic Reforms, and once again, the Supreme Court does nothing.
Yes, exactly. That is a pity because the Supreme Court is allowing itself to be bullied, to be run over, and doing nothing. Because this was a fit case. Because when the government passed the act after 9 months and removed the Chief Justice, so this was a direct insult to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court should have taken action the next day. So why are they not taking immediate action? Because they are busy. Every case is important. No, that's not acceptable. And respect has to be earned. And I'm very sorry to say that the Supreme Court's prestige has taken a beating in the last 10 years.
You mean that the Supreme Court's prestige has taken a beating on this issue?
Yes, on this issue and many other issues, as we have seen, successive chief justices have not done their job in time. They have delayed. They have the kind
Now,
of.
Mr. Quraishi, many people felt that the Supreme Court should have stayed the government's act. I'm talking about in 2023-24, but it refused to do so. In turn, that permitted the government to appoint in March 2024 two election commissioners by a clearly partisan and government-dominated collegium. If that has proceeded to undermine the Election Commission's standing, doesn't the Supreme Court share responsibility and blame?
Yes, indeed. Because I think the government has been trying to spite the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court is taking all these blows on its nose and not reacting. So now the 2023, they did not stay, and at that time they said, "Look, there are elections are all around the corner. It will upset the election schedule. So let us go ahead." So I think since then 5 appointments have been made.
Absolutely. Let's for a moment cap the situation we've established so far. To begin with, the Supreme Court did nothing for 8 long years. You've called that highly irresponsible. Then, when they did act, within 9 months, the government acted to overturn what the Supreme Court had done, breaching the very spirit of the Supreme Court's judgment. That was challenged by the Association for Democratic Reforms. And once again, the Supreme Court did absolutely nothing. So 2 consecutive instances of what you call irresponsible behavior by the Supreme Court. Is that right?
Yes. And by the way, I would like to mention that the 2015 case was basic issue there was that there has to be a bipartisan system of selection of election commissioners, whereas at the moment, government of the day appoints anybody. So therefore they say that there should be partisan. In a spirit they act, and they say that for 70 years you have not passed an act which was the mandate of Article 324(2) of the Constitution. Please pass an act, create a bipartisan thing, until you pass the act. The Collegium, which we are familiar, the Collegium which is already working for CIC, CVC, and others, which includes the Chief Justice, Prime Minister, Chief Justice, and LOP, will also make these appointments. So, by the way, before this act was passed,
Absolutely, but let's not get lost in those details. Let's stick and keep our focus on the Supreme Court's highly irresponsible behavior, because it goes one step further. We've already enumerated two instances. It goes one step further. This year, 2025, when the Chief Election Commissioner was due to retire, the Association for Democratic Reforms and other petitioners sought urgent hearings to prevent his replacement happening under the contested law. This time, the Supreme Court not only acted seemingly irresponsibly, it acted bizarrely. The incumbent CEC was scheduled to retire on the 18th of February, but the Supreme Court scheduled the hearing for the next day, the 19th of February. Now, when it was pointed out that this is an error you're making, the Supreme Court refused to advance the hearing. So once again, would you accept this is not just inexplicable, once again it's irresponsible?
yeah, exactly. By February 18, appointment would be made, and appointment was made. And even if Supreme Court had no time, they could have said that the procedure will be stayed for 2-3 days, 1 week. They did not even do that. So they were allowing themselves to be treated like this, and this is not good for the image of the Supreme Court and India's democracy.
Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. On the 19th of February, when the hearing did commence, it was adjourned almost immediately, and a new date has not been set. That's the important thing. No new date has been set, although the Supreme Court, according to newspaper reports, seems to have hinted that if it's raised on the 19th of March, it could be considered. But that's not setting a date, that's just holding out a sort of carrot. This means that the Supreme Court has kicked the matter into the long grass. We've no idea when it'll be tackled.
Yes. Also, by the way, at that time they said that in case the Supreme Court takes the decision that the act is ultra virus, so the court said that there will be consequences. I don't know whether there will be consequences. Looking at the past, whether there will be consequences, because in any case, the next appointment is in 2028. So Supreme Court will also feel there is no hurry, and they will take their own time.
And therefore, let's look at the consequences that face us today. The net result is that today we have an election commission where the chief election commissioner and both election commissioners have been appointed by a committee that is lopsided and government dominated. These people may be good and brilliant men, but that's irrelevant. This is not a happy situation for India's democracy, is it?
Yes, of course. Now, I've mentioned in that article that these two officers, I know them personally, they are really brilliant. No, there is no doubt about it, but it's a question of the procedure. And as they say, the cliche that the justice not only be done, but it should appear to be done. Similarly, the process has to be very, very transparent, which was the intention. And allow me, Karan, to bring in a very important fact here. The government initially accepted that and realized they had first brought another draft of the bill before Parliament, in which the Collegium had the Chief Justice. Later on, they thought, okay, look, we can take Supreme Court for granted, and then they changed it and they got away with it.
And the net result is today you have an election commission where every single member of the commission, both the election commissioners and the chief election commissioner, have been appointed by a lopsided government-dominated body.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
the point we're making is this is not a good situation for India's democracy. It is an unhappy situation.
Unhappy situation and extremely bad optics. It's an insult to the LOP. The two powerful members of the government on one side and LOP on the other side. It's a joke and on the nation and an insult. So what kind of collegium is this?
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Now, let me, because I think it's important that we should be fair, put a devil's advocate question to you. Until the government acted in December 2023 and created a collegium to appoint election commissioners and the CEC, all three were appointed solely at the Prime Minister's discretion. That is precisely what happened when you were made election commissioner. That's what happened when you were made CEC. If that system of appointment was acceptable for virtually 70, 75 years, and many good people were thus appointed, why is it a problem if the new committee is government dominated? In fact, the government could say that earlier it was just the Prime Minister who appointed. Now, at least the new committee has a role for the leader of the opposition. He had no role earlier on. So, why is this situation worse than what we had earlier?
Well, earlier the position was very clear that the government appoints you. And it's a miracle that for 70 years we all behaved responsibly. It's a miracle, no less than that. So at the same time, people were expressing concern about it. Even Mr. L.K. Advani at that time. And mind you, even I as an incumbent CEC and my predecessor incumbent CECs had been saying that there should be a collegium system. We would have felt stronger and more powerful if we were appointed by a collegium. And in fact, I would like to recall, Karan, you had done one interview, and as is your style, you made me repeat that point. When I said I would prefer to have been appointed by a collegium, you said you would have been happier if leader of opposition Sushma Swaraj had signed your appointment letter. I said definitely, because perceptions are important, and that would give the perception that I am acceptable across all political parties.
I will play that particular clip. We have it. It was an interview given to Devil's Advocate in, I believe, October 2011. We would play that clip just now so the audience can see exactly what you said when you were CEC yourself. It proves the fact that CECs like you, as far back as 2011, were insisting that a collegium should appoint the election commission. It should not be the prerogative of the government or the prime minister on his own. Here's the clip.
Now, at the moment, the election commission is appointed by the government of the day. Do you think the election commission should in fact be appointed by a collegium which includes people like the leader of the opposition, perhaps even the Chief Justice of India, so that you have greater standing?
Anything which enhances the credibility of an election commission is most welcome.
Now, you were appointed Chief Election Commissioner by Dr. Manmohan Singh and the UPA government. Would you feel more empowered, stronger, and more able to take measures if Sushma Swaraj and Arun Jaitley had been part of the appointing authority?
Yeah, public perception is so important, and this will definitely have help in the public perception of neutrality of the institution.
So the Election Commission would feel more powerful if it was appointed by a cross-political body rather than by the government?
Yes, I would think so.
Let me now, Mr. Quraishi, put a different question to you. How are election commissioners or their equivalents appointed in the major democracies of the world? For instance, how are they appointed in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in France? Can we in India learn from their example?
Yes, indeed. But allow me, Karan, to come back to the previous question, part of which I could not answer. Okay, what is the difference between the previous system of appointment and now the new collegium where leader of opposition has a role? Now, this leader of opposition has a role. What role? He is being made a fool of. So, therefore, to say that the leader of opposition, a token presence, actually they makes the situation worse. Earlier system that way was better. At least the government was directly, solely responsible for its act. Now, I've mentioned in the article many countries. In fact, I have often said, again, as an incumbent, the most powerful election commission of the world has the most defective system of appointment. This is what I have always said. Why? Because we are appointed by the government of the day, and occasionally somebody will say, "Oh, this he has been appointed by the Congress. He will be supporting the Congress." In fact, the truth is that perhaps the Congress men feel that I was extra hard to them, to trying to prove to myself that I'm fair.
But I take your point completely. But tell me, how are election commissioners or their equivalents appointed in the major democracies like the US, UK, and France? Can we in India
Yes,
learn
yes.
profitably from their example?
Certainly. Now, for instance, US. US has a federal commission, which is the one of the weakest commissions because it doesn't manage or conduct the election yet. It is appointed through a Senate interview. The Senate approves the proposal sent by the president. So, and then South Africa, France, everywhere there is a the Collegium system where parliamentary scrutiny and nearer home, entire Europe, nearer home in Nepal. So by the way, the appointment is done politically. For the 5 members, they are given a quota to every party. Yet there is a parliamentary hearing of the candidates. So that is the kind of system which we have all over the world. And why can't we have something more acceptable than what is being proposed now?
You're making a very important point. You're saying in major democracies like France, like South Africa, like the United Kingdom, like America, there is a level of hearing, whether it's the Senate, whether it's the Parliament, that vets and scrutinizes the government's appointment before that appointment is accepted and confirmed. Even in Nepal, you have a parliamentary hearing. The appointment may be done politically, but there's a parliamentary hearing to vet and scrutinize it. In other words, small democracies and big democracies have imposed a mechanism. They've created a mechanism to ensure that the choice, even if made by a political authority like the government, is scrutinized and vetted before it's accepted. That is the step, that is the procedure that is missing in India.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, one interesting fact I would like to point out in the case of US. The US has 6 members, 3 appointed by Republican Party, 3 by the Democrats. Totally political appointees, officially, legally. Yet it is approved by the Senate. So there I was like in Nepal, where although they are political appointees, but the fact that there is a parliamentary scrutiny, that gives them a sense of credibility, and which is the least that we require.
Now, let me put my last question to Mr. Quraishi. The Prime Minister repeatedly and proudly boasts that India is the world's largest democracy. Is it therefore fitting that the world's largest democracy should appoint election commissioners and chief election commissioners in this one-sided, government-dominated way? Does it not diminish our democracy?
Yes, indeed. I agree with the Prime Minister that we are indeed the largest democracy in the world. There is no doubt about it. And I would even add that we are the most historic democracy. 1,000 years, 2,000 years ago, we had village republics. There is a Chola, the model code of conduct I came across. It is so beautiful. It talks of corruption, it talks of nepotism. So the fact that democracy is in our roots, there is no doubt about it. But at the same time, we should remember, if the world is looking at us as a global group of democracy, 143 countries have come to train from us in our institute, India International Institute of Democracy and Election Management, under the Election Commission. They're all making a beeline, but don't
But
they?
the point is, are you saying this diminishes us?
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. But that was my next sentence. If they're all coming, but don't they know that this is a defect in our system? Will they not be talking about it in their own inner circle? It does diminish us, and unnecessarily the remedy is available. And I think it's very simple. Even if CGI if is returned to the Collegium, it will collapse the case which is going on. And that Collegium, let me remind you, same Collegium with the Chief Justice of India, CVC, CIC, and Lokpal, they have been doing it for 20 years and no questions have ever been raised.
Absolutely. So we end on the note with which we began. And I'm simply putting it to you for reconfirmation that the Supreme Court for 8 years did nothing. And then on 2 or 3 separate occasions, when it had an opportunity to act, it failed to do so. And as you said, the Supreme Court's failure is highly irresponsible. The net result is we've ended up with an election commission where every single member of that commission is appointed in a government-dominated, lopsided way. That, you said, is a defect in our system. It diminishes us. And as you said, we have an unhappy situation. This is extremely bad optics. You also said it was a joke on the nation and an insult. All
Yes.
of it badly is because the Supreme Court failed to act. I thank you, Mr. Quraishi, for the time you've given me and for your insight. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.